In our previous videos, we looked at the benefits of a perfectly competitive market. And one of those benefits was that a perfectly competitive market is allocatively efficient. That is, it uses scarce resources to produce what people want the most. What we're going to look at now are what we call market failures. Market failures are defects in the competitive market that prevent it from being allocatively efficient. And there are different types of market failures. Some goods, by their nature, create market failures, and we're going to look at those in this video and the next video, and that is the issue of public goods and common goods. There are other types of market failures we're going to be looking at in subsequent videos, and these include positive and negative externalities. If in the production or the consumption of a good or service, people who are not the buyers or sellers are impacted, this is an externality. Sometimes people are impacted for the better. This is a positive externality. And sometimes people are harmed. This is a negative externality. The perfectly competitive market, supply and demand, only consider the impact on the buyer and the seller. Ignore the impact on everybody else. And so this creates a problem from a societal perspective in allocating scarce resources because it's not considering the bigger picture, the hurt or the benefits to the greater society. So we'll look at those in the coming videos. We also have business cycles or instability in the market. We have income and wealth inequality. These are all defects in perfectly competitive markets. We said that perfectly competitive markets are a costless system because we don't need government intervention in the buying and selling and making of goods. So because of the income inequality, the instability in the market, because of these externalities, this is where we start to see the role of government in the competitive markets. And that's why we're not a perfectly competitive economy. We're a mix of competition and command systems. The last type of market failure we're going to look at this semester is a lack of competition. In a perfectly competitive market, you can have lots of sellers, but you don't have to be, especially if the government is not involved. Because businesses could choose not to compete with each other. They could collude. Businesses could buy up other businesses, and there could be less competition. So oligopolies and monopolies start to exist. These are market failures because in these types of markets, we are not allocatively efficient. Remember, allocatively efficient, we're using scarce resources to produce what people want the most. That's where supply and demand intersect, where you maximize the benefit to the consumer and the business. In oligopolies and monopolies, they're not producing until price is equal to marginal cost. They are intentionally producing less so they can charge more. They have market power. So we're going to look at those in more detail. But in this video, we're going to focus on the first type of market failure, which is the idea of public goods. Before we can dive into the issue of public goods first, we need to know a couple definitions. We need to know the difference between rival and non-rival. And we need to know the difference between excludable and non-excludable. So let's think about some different types of products. Let's start with the cheeseburger. So if I had a cheeseburger here in my hand, the question is it rival or non-rival? If it's rival, then when I eat the cheeseburger, there is one less available for everyone else. If it is non-rival, then my consumption of the cheeseburger would not diminish the availability for everyone else. So if we think about a cheeseburger, if I bite into that cheeseburger, what happens to the amount available for you? So a cheeseburger is rival. Now, is a cheeseburger excludable or non-excludable? Excludable means that we can keep the non-payers out. So if you don't pay for it, you don't get to enjoy it. So if we think about a cheeseburger, let's say from McDonald's, if you don't pay for the cheeseburger, if you don't pay McDonald's for it, do you get it? Well, McDonald's can exclude the non-payer. They can prevent the person who doesn't pay for the cheeseburger from getting access to it. So the cheeseburger is excludable. Goods that are rival and excludable are private goods. The perfectly competitive market is based on private goods, the idea that goods are rival and excludable. Where we start to see market failure is when we have goods that are non-rival and non-excludable. So let's think about fireworks, for example. If I'm out enjoying the fireworks, okay, and I'm only 5'3", if I'm out enjoying the fireworks, I'm looking up at the sky, does that reduce the ability of you to enjoy them? Well, I'm probably not blocking the sky from you. So that means that my enjoying it doesn't reduce your ability to enjoy it. I guess if you just hate the thought that I'm enjoying the fireworks and that makes you grumpy, well, maybe then it reduces your ability to enjoy it. But when we talk about fireworks, one person enjoying fireworks does not impact somebody else's ability to enjoy them. So the fireworks are non-rival. Now, are they excludable or non-excludable? So let's suppose that you pay for a fireworks display so that you can enjoy them. Can you exclude me? Can you prevent me from enjoying the fireworks as well if I did not pitch in and help pay for it? Well, the problem is you're shooting them up in the sky, and unless you're putting a blindfold over me, you're not preventing me from seeing the fireworks. So the fireworks are non-excludable. It's hard to keep the non-payer, those who didn't contribute, from consuming or enjoying as well. Well, this can create a challenge. Okay, so the problem is that if we can't keep people from enjoying it, there's kind of an incentive to let's think this through a little bit. Okay, so perhaps you've ever watched Sesame Street or Antiques Roadshow or something on PBS in the US. Or maybe you have looked up something on Wikipedia. Did you ever send money to PBS? Did you ever pay money to Wikipedia? So the problem with these is that they are difficult to exclude the non-payer, right? They're available for all to see. Well, so what happens in these scenarios if we can't exclude the non-payer? So what if we put Wikipedia behind a paywall? You don't pay, you don't get to access the website. Okay? Well, if we looked at the greater population, a lot fewer people would pay for Wikipedia. But if it's not behind a paywall, then we all enjoy it. But when they ask for donations for PBS or Wikipedia, we all just say, not it, right? We assume somebody else is going to chip in, and we'll just enjoy the benefits. This is what is called the free rider problem. The free rider problem happens when you have public goods that are non-excludable, when it's hard to keep the non-payer out, because we all just assume somebody else will pay for it. Somebody else will cover it. Okay, well, let's think about a street light. Let's suppose that I put up a street light next to my house, and I ask all my neighbors to help chip in and pay for the electricity. Okay, so when I enjoy that street light, so let's go back to our definition here. When I enjoy that street light, does it reduce the ability of others to enjoy it? No, the street light, non-rival. Now I ask my neighbors to help pay for that street lamp, and what if they don't? What if they don't pay any money? Can I exclude them from enjoying the benefits of the street light by lighting up the street? Well, the problem is that I can't exclude them. I can't just have the light off for them, but have the light on for me, because if the light's on, they can benefit as well. So how do we get people who are enjoying the benefits of it to pay for it? Whether you're talking fireworks, whether we are talking the street light. The solution to the free rider problem, where people just assume somebody else will pay, is to have everybody pay, is to pay for things through taxes. And so the street lights, for example, we don't each pay for the one in front of our house. Instead, they're all paid for by our taxes. And even things like PBS in the States, right? They're receiving tax subsidies to help cover those costs, because collectively we benefit when kids are watching Sesame Street. Then we all help pay for it. So public goods, let's just start a list here, if we can. We're going to make a list of market failures, and we're going to spend a couple videos adding to this list. And we're going to make a list of solutions. Okay. So the first market failure we have are public goods. And the problem they create is the free rider problem. That is, everyone else assumes somebody else will pay. Well, this creates a problem, because if we all assume somebody else will pay, what happens to the actual quantity that is produced? Is it the socially optimal amount? Well, the problem is that only a handful of people are paying for it. So the quantity that's being produced is less than the amount that we collectively want. We're just assuming somebody else will cover it. So this free rider problem leads to underproduction, right? We're not going to make enough of it because the amount we actually produce is based on those who pay. Wikipedia only exists if people are willing to pay. If less and less of us are willing to pay, then it doesn't continue to operate. Same thing with PBS. So what's the solution? The solution to the free rider problem, or this underproduction that happens because we're all enjoying it, but only a handful of people are paying for it, so the quantity produced is based on who pays. The solution is for everyone to pay, and we pay for it with things like our taxes. And that way, everyone who benefits is paying for it, and then the quantity produced will be the amount that is optimal, the amount that society wants. Remember, allocative efficiency, using scarce resources to produce what society wants the most. So the free rider problem, we're all enjoying it, we're not all paying for it, and the people who pay will determine the quantity that is produced. Well, we said it's important to know different types of goods and their definitions. We know the public good creates market failures. We know that the perfectly competitive market is based on private goods. So let's just look at a couple more goods and their definitions to help us understand what creates the problem with public goods and not with private goods. So we said private goods are both rival. If I enjoy it, there's one less available for you. And excludable. If you don't pay, you don't get it. Public goods are non-rival. So if I enjoy it, it doesn't reduce your ability to enjoy. And non-excludable. So if you don't pay, you can still enjoy it, which is what creates that free rider problem. We're all along for the free ride. We assume somebody else will pay for it. There are two other types of goods that we should know. There is one called a common good and one called a collective or club good. A common good is a good that is rival. So here, if I enjoy it, there's one less available for you. And non-excludable. In comparison, a collective or a club good is non-rival. That is, if I enjoy it, it doesn't reduce your ability to enjoy. And it is excludable. We can keep the non-payers out. You're going to do a little activity in Blackboard and identify whether goods are public, common, collective, or private based on these definitions. So see if you can figure out some examples of these different types of goods. So we already looked at a private good, that was the cheeseburger. We already looked at the public goods, that would be things like an outside light, the fireworks, things like that. Let's take a look at common goods and some examples of common goods. When we think about common goods, they're rival, so if you use it up, there's less available, but it's difficult to keep the non-payer out. So when we think about things like wild game, fish in the ocean, these are common goods. So if you go hunting for a wild turkey, there is one less wild turkey out in the wild. So rival. The challenge, of course, is if you wanted to limit access to the ocean or hunting wild game, it's hard to exclude the non-payer, right? It's a large area, it's hard to manage. And fish and game, they move around. So it's difficult to keep the non-payer out. Well, what happens when a good is rival and non-excludable? Well, if it's hard to keep the non-payers out, then when one person goes and takes some, another one will be concerned, well, if they're going to take the good, then I need some too. And there may not be enough for me if they take some, so I'll take more. And the problem is that they are rival. We use them up. And because we can't exclude the non-payer and limit the number who are consuming, then there's a tendency to use it all up until it's gone. So the challenge, the market failure created with common goods, is what we call the tragedy of the commons. That is, we have overconsumption. We tend to use them up until they're gone. So what's the solution to the tragedy of the commons? How do you prevent people from just taking all of these goods until they're gone? Well, what could we do? The problem with this is that the market itself, those who are going hunting, fishing, they're not taking into consideration the greater impact. They're getting what they want, but they're not considering the impact on society. So we're not taking into consideration the bigger social cost. So what do we do? Well, what do we currently do when it comes to hunting and fishing? We have some solutions, right? We have hunting and fishing license. So we try to exclude the non-payer by selling a license, access, to get these items, and we monitor it, right? We have a fish and game division of the government that's in charge of making sure that the people who are hunting and fishing have those licenses. So we're trying to exclude the non-payer with these processes. We can put on quotas. We can limit the number of fish or the number of, like if you are deer hunting, how many you can take at certain times. So there's quotas, restrictions on the number. So there's different attempts that we can make to try to resolve this tragedy of the commons where we have this overconsumption. So here we're dealing with government regulation in order to help reduce that overconsumption. So if we go back to the definitions of these different types of goods, what creates the problem, the market failure, is this idea of non-excludable. The perfectly competitive market is really based on the business incurring the full cost to make the product and the customer being willing to pay for that. So really it's about giving access only to those who pay for it. So public goods and common goods, because they are both non-excludable, create these market failures. Whereas private goods and collective or club goods are excludable. We can keep the non-payer out. Whether something is rival or non-rival doesn't create the market failure. So a private good, here's a Mars bar, If I consume this and there's one less available, okay, that's not what creates the market failure. If we were talking about a collective or club good, for example, an electronic book. Okay, so maybe you've switched, instead of reading paperback books, you read them on your Kindle or your Kobo or your iPad. Because you're reading the book doesn't reduce the ability of others to read that same book, because it's now available electronically, so it's non-rival. But the companies can make them excludable. Only those who pay for the book can have access to the book. The perfectly competitive market is based on this excludability idea. That's how the market works. It's the non-excludable goods that create market failures.